Aloha, and welcome back to WANDEROUS, your favorite podcast, hosted by me, Andrew Crusoe. That's my real name. Today, we are going to talk about one of my favorite spots in Marseille, in the south of France, the cutest, coziest little neighborhood. Come along with me. So, on the last exciting episode of WANDEROUS, I told the story of Fontaine de Voir, the hidden ancient fountain within the hike of Croix de Marseille. So you go through and you go over these limestone and you get to the top of this limestone mountain, essentially, and you get to see the islands in the distance in the Mediterranean Sea, and you get to see the city of Marseille spread out in this gorgeous panorama, and the gorgeous people that are supporting this show got to see, I think it was like 16 or 17 photos last week of that beautiful place. Thank you again for anybody who just donates any amount of money. Once again, you can cancel at any time, and that's at patreon.com/HelloCrusoe. I'm sure I'll talk about that more in a minute. And it was still my favorite hike that I've done in France, probably in all of Europe. And as I was reviewing the photos for today's episode, I was surprised that I went to La Panier the very next day. So this was a very action-packed week for me. And I would even be in Paris the following week and even see Disney Paris after about 9 days from the story I'm going to tell you now. So things are starting to accelerate. Things are starting to get even more interesting, and I have a lot of funny stories to share today. And today's story is about my favorite neighborhood, probably my favorite neighborhood in all of Marseille. And there are a lot of really beautiful places, little cozy places, quirky places. I know I talked about La Friche, or the Wasteland, which, since you've been listening for a while, I will finally reveal that the Wasteland was actually a retired cigar factory. I almost forgot to mention that. I've been meaning to mention that in one of these episodes. Yes, it's true. And it's much cooler now because I think cigars are stupid, but that's my opinion. Your mileage may vary. At the very least, I think it's unwise to put something like that unfiltered into your lungs, but I digress. My absolute favorite neighborhood is this place called La Panier, which basically means the basket. And it's, I don't know how to entry into this story, but I had been chatting with someone in one of the, I think it was like Meetup, or it might even have been like Bumble, to be honest. I don't usually talk about Bumble in the public episodes, but this is, I mean, you know, sometimes you meet people on Bumble or even on something like Tinder or OkCupid. I don't know if you're familiar with these goofy apps, but sometimes you meet somebody on there, and maybe this is only true if you're a nerd, but sometimes you meet somebody on there and you're like, oh, we don't have chemistry, but we like hiking and doing some stuff, right? Like, you might not want to date somebody, but they might be a good activity partner. They might be excited to show you around. So you can actually use stuff like Bumble. There's even a friend mode on Bumble now. You can use that to meet locals who are just excited to show their city off to people that are visiting. And I was really lucky, and that happened to me a few times in Europe when I was there. You know, the EU allows people with American passports to stay in the EU for up to 90 days. And I was there for about 85, maybe 80 days. So we've got, and this is only about like halfway into that time. So we've definitely have a lot to cover. So I'm walking around with my friend who's cool, and she's French and sort of shy but smart, and just loved showing me around and doing walks and asking me about how I traveled, and because I travel sort of unusually with things like couch surfing and Workaway, which I hadn't used up to that point. But those services are they're becoming more and more popular. So we made this plan to hike around Calanque-sur-Miaou, which is the Calanque, the little bay, just surrounded by all these towering, they're like basically limestone fjords. And there's this cute little blue bay. So we made a plan to go check that out first. And I'll pull up the photos just so I can remember all the details of the story, because sometimes my brain memory is just a little Swiss cheesy. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to leave a little Easter egg hunt for people who get the photos. Those come out just about every single Wednesday, like clockwork. And I'm having 24 photos are coming out this next Wednesday, which I'm really excited about. These are really fun. And there is a little hidden theme. The only hint that I'm going to give for these is that it is art. There is an art theme in the graffiti. And I'm going to see if anybody can point it out. If you do, I will give you a treat. So we get down, we hike through the limestone, the kind of the badlands, of these little shrubberies all around, and we get down to the restaurant that's sort of up in front of the bay, and everybody's there. There's plenty of dozens of people just kind of sunbathing. It's kind of cloudy, but it's a nice day, and just enjoyed being by the Mediterranean and I think I dipped my feet in. But my favorite part, and I will tell you, if you've ever been to the northern hiking areas in Northern California, these rock formations very much remind me of that sort of, even like Tahoe sort of vibe. And these, I just was once again just amazed at how pretty and weird and lumpy these rocks were. But then there was a bigger surprise waiting for me. We took a different route back. I was trying to save time, so we were using Google Maps walking directions, which is always fun and never goes wrong. And we came across a memorial, an obelisk, a small obelisk, which I translated, but I knew most of the words here anyway. And it's dedicated to these three men who were very young. They were 17, 19, and 23 years old. And I have a picture of this as well for the people who get the bonuses, who were killed by the Vichy police in 1944. The dedication is very critical of the Vichy police, as you can understand, and that's worth looking into. Maybe I'll put some stuff about that into the show notes. I don't want to get derailed too much, but you never know when you're going to come across a memorial or an abandoned monument. I said something along these lines last episode, that a lot of things are just around, especially and maybe this area, obviously this area was special. We were technically in the Parc de National Calanque, the Calanque National Park, which is a very large, it covers hundreds of hectares in the south of France. So there are things there that are not going to be changed very much because the land is owned by the state. So you find all these interesting little ruins. We also found, and I have a photo of this, sort of a destroyed wall that has it's like a little space under the wall for a stream to go through. Maybe people have thoughts about that. But let's move on. I want to get to Le Panier, because Le Panier is just super fun. Just every corner of this area was like oozing culture and style, I guess. So we took the bus. I used my unlimited Metro pass, which I've spoken about before, and we took the bus up to, we caught it just barely from Le Baumettes, and we took it all the way across town. It took a little while, but it was essentially free because I already had the pass, and got to sort of by the old viewport, and we kept walking up, and there was a spot. It's really funky. There's a funky spot just north of Viewport, the old port, that is basically a big hill, but it's sort of disguised because there's so many buildings. There's just so much going on, right? But my friend knew where to go, and we walk up this staircase that leads us up, and before I know it, we're on street level again. Kind of a San Francisco vibe, right? And one of the first pictures I take after going up this staircase was a box in front of a building that was the Miaou box, where a cat lived in it. A street cat lived in this Miaou box, and it was just very cute. It was like an art project, and I guess it was some kid's cat. I don't know. It was really cute. And the cat would peek its head out, and the hole for the cat was cut in the shape of a cat's head. Anyway, it's a weird photo. But then we began. This, I will say, the photo after that, and then maybe I'll release this for free because it's so cool. It gives you a taste of what it is to walk around La Panier. Highly recommend. This is very important. If you go to Marseille, go to Notre Dame de la Garde. Definitely. That's the tallest point in the city. I've had an episode about that. That was like 2 or 3 or 4 episodes ago. But I would say the second most important thing, really, in terms of the culture, in terms of getting a taste of the city, in terms of just feeling in little bitty shops and cute little things and the color and the vibrancy, the real life, the joie de vivre, seriously, it can be found very much in La Panier. And we wander around, and I am transported into almost feels like another time. It's definitely a different vibe. Yeah, sure, there are people selling bags, and but there's all of this art on the buildings, beautiful like street art, and places where it's a little bit quieter, and there's these like terracotta. I mean, I'm not an architect, but the way that these orange tan buildings were these vertical statements against this light blue sky was very striking, very beautiful. Old buildings, but well maintained, and just goofy art. Like people, this one is someone painted a dog house, and the dog is sticking out like a paint roller, a green paint roller, and he's gonna paint. But you don't see the dog. I don't know what it means. It's very cartoonish, and it was very playful. Another great one is the painting of the face. You'll probably come across this very striking blue-faced woman with bright red lipstick, sort of abstracted, kind of Picasso sort of style. Really, really gorgeous art. There's also I love this piece too. Like using only 3 colors here: a deep navy blue, but then accented with like a lime yellow, green, and red. This striking portrait of I think it might be an Algerian woman. There are so many Algerians that come up to Marseille from Algeria, or historically did. And we were just drinking it in. This huge art painted along all of the walls. It was just really special. Honestly, probably the best thing, besides La Friche, probably the best free thing you can do that's enjoyable. You're just walking around. And then we continued on, and we made our way to a cathedral, basically the Marseille Cathedral. It has a longer name in French, the Cathedral Major, that's near the coast. We sort of came back around, because when you go up in La Panier, you're up in elevation, and you start to make your way down as you proceed west. So we ended up sort of near the cathedral anyway, and I was like, well, we're near this huge cathedral, and I like architecture. Let's go check it out. And it very much continued a lot of the motifs that I saw in Notre Dame de la Garde, on the Notre Dame de la Garde hill. And there was like the striations of, what would that be? Granite and then rose marble. So they were really into stripes. That's all I have to say about that. Oh, I almost forgot. There was one thing I wanted to read to you, and I will put this in the show notes for free for everybody. There's a lovely web page that they've made. I sound like I'm 80. There's a web page that they made for La Panier, and I want to read a little bit because I like the way they describe this. Dive into the heart of Marseille's oldest district. To make the most of this legendary place, the best way is to wander around until you get lost in the narrow streets where a friendly and calm atmosphere prevails. How enjoyable! I wonder if this was translated directly from French. With small cafe terraces, street art colored facades, and small designer shops, you won't know where to start. A real open-air museum. You need to be fit enough to go up and down many stairs, true, but your efforts will be rewarded with the locals' Mediterranean spontaneity and stunning views of the Big Blue. I guess they're talking about Mediterranean. When it comes to visiting Marseille, the Panier is an essential location to explore. So, and then the webpage goes on and says how Marseille was born in 600 BC, which we learned about in the last episode, where Panier currently stands. The Greeks picked this location because of its privileged location on the top of a hill near the sea. They settled near the Butte Saint Laurent. In the 12th century, a hospital was founded by the Fraternity of the Holy Spirit, which later became Hôtel Dieu. In 1745, the building of a large hospice was completed. In the 19th and 20th century, Le Panier was an unhealthy district and infamous for prostitution and bad reputations. But the end of the 20th century and the early 20th century, there was a huge renovation and urban development took place, and today the district's been given a makeover, and it's home of artist studios and shops and designs, and it's become a must-see of Marseille. Anyway, so that's a nice page. You can see photos, and you can read more about the history. I'll include that. But yes, we got to the other side of Marseille and we saw the Cathedral Major. I'm probably mispronouncing that. And we went inside and we had a lovely time looking at these vaulted ceilings. And the style was very much like Notre Dame de la Garde, the cathedral I'd been to the week before. It was a little more restrained. There weren't little ships and bunch of sailor basically, votives, like people, donations from sailors. There wasn't so much for that. It was a little more, it was more restrained. It was more cleaned, and there were statues of all four of the main apostles. The ones we talk about, but in the French version of the name. So there was Saint Jean, Jean instead of John, right? Saint Matthew, which is, they spelled differently, but it's Matthew. And Saint Mark spelled with a C, and Saint Luc, which is just spelled L-U-C, apparently is how you spell Luke in French. And they also had a beautiful nativity scene toward the back of the cathedral. It was gorgeous, expansive, like very detailed, tiny little models. I don't know why, but I appreciated it, and it is definitely another thing I would recommend if you're on like the west side near Vieux-Port. Definitely worth walking in and just drinking in the beauty of this cathedral. Even though it's not super ancient, it was built in sort of like a Romanesque style, I suppose. It's super fun and it's free. It's just a beautiful place. And it's a place, if you want a place of contemplation or prayer, there are seats, and that is also something that is welcome. But by this time, I was getting pretty hungry, and I had already got a pin in my map for a nice plant-based place that we could eat, and that was Flower Burger, which I am absolutely going to give a free PR to, because all the plant-based places deserve free attention and free advertising, in my opinion, in as much as I'm able. So we went up to Flower Burger, which was this cute little cafe. They've moved now. I will link to them in the show notes, their website at least. And they have, what's really cool about Flower Burger, just very briefly, is the buns are these crazy colors. They give you, so it's a plant-based burger. I don't know if you know about Impossible Burger or the Beyond Burger. It's sort of similar. Absolutely delicious, great, well-rounded burger. And the fun thing was, and I started to see a pattern here because there was another place I went that also had a colorful bun. I think maybe it's a French thing. They really want to make things extra colorful. I don't know. This one was like a yellow bun, like a bright, like stoplight yellow. I forget what was in it exactly, but it was totally delicious. And we had, that was a wonderful way to round out our day. I do recall now, as I'm telling this, that I tried to get over to the lighthouse. And here's my other travel tip for this episode. Don't try to get over to the lighthouse. It's in a restricted area. So we're trying to find a way around. There's like a parking lot. We're walking so we get to the main street again, and we're walking down, And she, you know, we're like, we get to this area that's sort of like a gated parking lot, and I'm like, we could probably go through there. And the guy's like, no, she's like translating for me because my French is very poor. At least, you know, I can understand, I can read a few things, I can understand a few things, but normal conversation, complicated questions takes a while to get fluent. And no, there's no way to get over to this area. The closest that you could get is we would have to go all the way around down to the Museum of the Mediterranean, which I would actually go in there a little later. But that day, no, that area around the harbor, as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of very secure areas. There's places where, you know, they're receiving shipments in, and only certain people are supposed to be in those little areas. It did remind me a bit of Hilo, Hawaii, where I lived. But in Hilo, the security, there's really only one small little secure place. It's so much more relaxed. I mean, there's only 50,000 people in Hilo, so it's a different vibe. But, you know, you can, long story short, you can get to places in Hilo that even though they're city-owned places, the city doesn't really care. And you can't really do that when you're not in Hawaii, I think. There's definitely, and actually the big reason for that is because the shorefront is public. The shorefront, nobody can own the beach on Hawaii, and it's a very important law that they've done in order to protect access so the locals can fish and basically preserve their culture. So that took a fun little detour. But that was a lovely, rich day that I experienced. I highly recommend you check out La Panier. It's I can link to it. Like I said, I'll link to the description page. The Marseille city government has a great little website about that area and other things you can see nearby. So once again, thank you for listening to Wanderous. I have a lot of good stuff coming up. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment. I respond to comments. Also, please subscribe on Spotify. It really helps. Yeah. I'm really excited for what's coming up. Be well.